Hey, what's going on, movie fans all over the world? You already know who it is. It's your boy, MS21, Mikey Savage 21, whatever the heck you want to call me. And today, I am bringing you another movie review. And today, we're going to be looking at the film Insidious, The Last Key, aka Insidious Chapter 4. Now, alright. Breaking down this movie, basically this is set after the events in the previous film where Elise Rainier, she goes to investigate the recent supernatural disturbances occurring in a family's home in New Mexico, a house which she used to live in her youth. And the film starts off in 1953 during Elise's childhood. This is where we get to see her relationship with her mother, her father. So again, this movie takes place before Chapter 1 or Insidious 1 and Chapter 2, but takes place after Insidious 3 or Insidious Chapter 3, however you want to call it. Again, this is directed by a new director, Adam Robitel. He does have some writing credits to him. He has directed the 2014's The Taking of Deborah Logan. Actually a pretty good movie. I think it's still up on Netflix if you guys want to check it out. And he was the co-writer for Paranormal Activity, The Ghost Dimension. Yeah, well. And then of course we have James Wan and Leigh Whannell coming back to team up once again on this, with Jason Blum also producing. And then of course we have our stars Lynn, Shaye, Angus, Sampson, Leigh Whannell, Josh Stewart, Caitlin Gerard, Bruce Davison. So my personal thoughts on this movie. Honestly, if I'm being honest, what I thought about the film, I'll say this much. I didn't enjoy it as much as I did with the first one or the second one, and I'll explain why later on in the video. But I did enjoy this movie more than I did 3. I felt like 3 did have a lot of creepy, dark moments in it, but I still felt like we kind of got a little bit lost with trying to do so much. Look at this, look at this, look at this, visuals and everything, that sometimes we kind of got a little missed out on the story. Whereas here we focus more so on the actual story of Elise's character. And then we get to figure out what is her connection to the further. We get that is even further explained, how she ties into the first film and the second film as well. And so this movie was a good setup movie into getting us into what will eventually be Insidious 1 and then Insidious Chapter 2. So I felt like this was a good setup film. Again, pacing wise, I felt like it was paced very good for the most part. Again, it didn't feel too rushed. In terms of jump scares, not really too many jump scares this time around. We focus more so on story than actually being scary this time around. There are a few boo ah gotcha moments, but I feel like most of them are smart boo ah moments. So it felt like James Wan did have something to do with this, because one of the things I'll say about James Wan that I was missing about the third one was I felt like they didn't exactly capture James Wan's style, because James Wan loves to scare you when you don't think you're going to be scared. And then once you're scared, he'll throw another scare at you out of left field. And there were a lot of false scares in this movie that seemed really creepy. Again, talking about the character of Lynn Shaye. Lynn Shaye has been the staple throughout this entire franchise, whether she was in the first one, the second one. Again, we get to see her Chapter 3. We get to, again, that's where the prequels start. And we get to learn a little bit more about her and her connection to the further and her former relationship that she had with her deceased husband. Again, in third one, it's mentioned where basically she is still trying to reach out to her husband in the third one, still trying to find that closure that she's ultimately looking for. And then, of course, this one culminates with her accepting that and everything, but she's having like these terrible nightmares and visions and everything and can't explain why. So ultimately she ends up having to go back into the further even deeper and then going back into her past. And again, one of the things I will say about this movie, it was a good setup movie in terms of setting up for things to come. Like, we always wondered why the Specs and Tucker wear the outfits that they do. Again, we find out that she has a long lost brother. We get to see her connection with her brother. One of the other things that I really liked about this movie is we got to see her childhood. Like, one of the things I was wondering about when I saw the original first two was, I wonder what her childhood was like. Well, this movie basically gives us the question of what her childhood is like, how it was growing up with this gift. Now, getting into some negatives in terms of this film. Again, one of the things I'll say about this is This movie is more focused on story, but it does not have as many scares, as opposed to the third one where it had a lot more scares, but the story suffered because of it. And I feel like they weren't able to strike a good balance like they were in the first two, especially with the first one with James Wan, where you had a good balance of story, but also had a good balance of horror mixed in there as well. Some of the other negatives are, I felt like, again, this was a setup film, but I felt like they set up way too much. Like, there are certain characters in here that have been revealed to also be able to travel into the further. And I'm feeling like, okay, so is this a thing that's going to be, we're going to be, if they want to continue with this series, are we going to focus more on these new characters now, and how they're able to travel into the further and everything? I like the concept of there being more people that can go into the further, but I also liked it how in the first two where it was just a few, like a handful of people could do this, because now the way that this movie is telling it, it's kind of like the Force basically from Star Wars, where everybody has access to the Force somewhat, that everyone has that possibility, as opposed to it just being a select few. And again, for Star Wars that works. For the Insidious franchise, it doesn't necessarily work. One of the other things I felt like this movie suffered from was the climax, ultimately the ending of the film. Ultimately, I felt like there was resolution and everything, and they did a good job of tying this into the first and second film. However, I felt like the climax just didn't last long enough. Like when we got to the ultimate big bad, which is the key master or the key man, we get a little bit of backstory between the key master, or whatever you want to call him, key fingers. They don't really specifically give him a name. He's just a dude with keys on his finger. We get some backstory between how him and Elise know each other, and the conflict that they've had ever since she was a child, kind of similar to the conflict that she ended up having with the woman in black from the third film, which ties back into the end of the first film and the beginning of the second film. But the ending itself, it felt like the climax was just very lackluster. Like, we really didn't get an opportunity to resolve this in a way that made sense. It just felt like it was there's this going on and this going on, and all of a sudden it's over with. I like how they focused on story, and they were trying to keep a consistent pace. They weren't trying to drag this movie for more than 2 hours, but at the same time, I felt like the ending suffered from that, and that was one of my negatives I feel like I have to also bring up, is again the climax of the film. But other than that, I do think it's a solid film. I do think if you have sat through all of the other Insidious films, why not go ahead and check this one out? This one seems like it might be the final one, but again, I like the way it ended. I like the way it tied up. I think they used the characters very well one last time. Again, I think we got a good backstory into how she got her power, what it's like growing up with her powers, and being able to travel to the further and being able to see these spirits and everything. Like the family ties and connection that she had to the house and that she had to that town of New Mexico. Again, I like her relationship with Specs and Tucker. We get to see how they ultimately form this team, how they get the infamous van that we ultimately see in the first film. So there are so many nuggets, and again, I feel like this movie is a solid setup film leading into whatever is to come next. But in terms of a score, I'm ultimately gonna settle with a 7 out of a 10. I think a 7 out of a 10 is a perfect score for this film. Coming off of it and having time to process it, I do feel like it was a good movie, a solid movie, but I can definitely see why it's getting mixed reviews right now, why its Rotten Tomato score is so low, and why a lot of people and audiences aren't exactly enjoying this movie. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I think. I'm just a stupid head who's just giving my opinion. What really matters is you all. What do you think of Insidious Chapter 4? Have you seen it? Do you plan to check it out? Do you think that this is the last one? Do you think this franchise has ran its course? Let me know all of that down in the comment section below. Like I've been saying in all my last videos, guys, make sure you smash that like button. It lets me know that you're enjoying the content. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're very close to hitting 2,000. Again, my goal is to hit 2,000 by the end of January, and I need you all to help me with that goal. So again, if you like the video, share it out with a friend, ask them to subscribe, and then you subscribe yourself. Tell them to make sure that they hit the bell as well so they'll be notified every time a video drops. Thank you again, as always, for watching my videos and watching this review specifically, and I hope you all have a great day. Later, y'all.